Tom, how did that feel, seeing it on the big screen like that?
I like a big screen. It felt good. I mean, we should ask these people though.
How did it feel? There we go. So, Tom, I was hoping we could start with you and really start with the novel. What were you looking to explore with this story? Was it the situations or was it the characters?
Both. Yeah. So I think that, in a personal way, the story started just because my kids went off to college. And I was just thinking about that as a phase of life that I hadn't really been aware of, like this moment when this thing that has defined what felt like your life, and you just realize now it's just a part of it, and some other part is starting. So that was kind of the personal part. But then, college itself, I think, is this place, right now where sex and gender are being redefined and the rules are changing. And I just thought it'd be really interesting to follow, Eve at home and Brendon at school, and they're both grappling with some of the same issues. How do we find pleasure? How do we find happiness? How do we behave ethically? Just all those questions that are, swirling around sex right now. That was really the subject that I wanted to explore.
And when you're planning to adapt it to a series, what were some of the hard decisions that you had to make in that process?
When you're planning to adapt everything, seems like a hard decision. But this is the product of, like a year of talking and writing and wrestling. Every scene we can probably tell you what was the hard part. It was. I mean, I'm so proud of it, and so much of it I think, as being fun, but it was also hard. We really, I think everybody involved with it felt like we were dealing with, important stuff, and everyone had an opinion, and we had to kind of figure out what exactly we wanted to say at every moment, really.
And I think that's an interesting switch, because as a novelist, it's all yours in a way, and it's that feeling of writing in seclusion or whatever. But when you're adapting it, you've got this tremendous cast, you've got these tremendous directors that you're working with, and writers as well. And what did that collaboration look like? And I guess you had to be open to it because that was the decision you made.
Yeah, no, I think what you want from collaboration is for the people around you to elevate the material and also to create something new. I think the book exists, anyone can read it, but the show is something else, and we were trying to infuse new life into it. And you're right. I mean, what a cast! First of all, Kathryn Hahn. It's just extraordinary, and I wish Jackson White were here, who plays Brendon. He's just a tremendous young actor. Owen Teague, who plays Julian. Each one of these actors, and I could name the whole cast, and I should. Rashad Edwards is here tonight, I know. Rashad, can you stand up?
So good.
Hey.
Woo! Woo!
Is Josh Hamilton here? No? Okay, well, Josh isn't here, but he's amazing. I would, just an amazing cast. And, do you want to talk about the
Well,
cast?
speaking of cast, my next question is for Kathryn. What were the characteristics of Eve that drew you to her?
I mean, so much. I think initially it was like this, a great amount of, I think, empathy, and something that moved me deeply was her trying to live a life along the straight and narrow. Like, she just was had spent so many years trying to just always do the right thing and be a good person and stay within a certain set of social parameters, or just do what society, just to not cause waves. She's holding on to all these identities and all these monikers and all these expectations that that she puts on herself, or that society had put on her, and all these things, and she, none of that had added up to something that was maybe ultimately that soul that actually felt that great for her. You know what I mean? It was like she kind of like been doing all the right things, and it really hadn't given her exactly what she had been looking for, or really felt that good. So now she's at this amazing. You find her when her son's going off to college. Her son, that even that, all the energy she put into that relationship, which she didn't end up really feeling, as much as she would have had hoped. And so now she's by herself with this opportunity, and there's this Pandora's box that she can open up to find maybe who she is, or try on all these new, different identities. So anyway, I found that very moving to me. Is this woman at this age where maybe it sucks, to be in your mid 40s, and maybe society's like, oh, you're invisible. Your sexuality is not as important anymore. Like you're the mom moniker is kind of now not even important anymore. Like all these societal and it's actually a time of great power, and that she's at a place where she can is trying to harness all that. I just found it very exciting and very moving to try to jump into that, all thanks to this world that this human proposed.
And I feel like characters like Raquel in Transparent, Chris and I Love Dick, and now even Mrs. Fletcher, they're all experiencing these new sexual urges, frustrations, anxieties. And as an actor, how do you balance the comedy and drama associated to sex?
Well, I mean, I think sex is hilarious. But I also think but I mean, it's also very human, and I think it's and anything that is very funny, it's just gonna it's just right down the middle of just exactly where that sweet spot is, of just what it is to be a human being. It's right down the razor's edge middle. So of course, it's not at all surprising that it is exactly that fine line. And it's funny that all those parts kind of are tackling a lot of the same stuff. I just think it is, I just think there is something really powerful about seeing women represented at this age, that are still, it doesn't end. That are still sexual beings, and it also just isn't about sex. It's more, I think it really is more existential than that. I think the porn is really a stand-in, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but for a lot of, it's more, it feels existential to me. It's something more searching. It's just a way in. She's having an affair with herself, really. It's a way of falling in love with herself.
I like that. Oh, thank you. So this is a question for both of you, actually. I believe you're both parents. I've recently become a parent myself, and there's a particular kind of anxiety watching that dynamic between Eve and Brendon in this, especially because they're both going in very different directions in a way, or even similar directions. And Brendon is not the perfect son by any means. How did your own experiences as parents influence your writing and your performance?
Well, my kids are wonderful, but some of their friends, and I think, I mean, if you raise a boy, there's this moment at puberty where we happen to live in the same town for all these years. So I watched these kids grow from 5 to 20 or whatever, and there's just that moment when they kind of shut down. A lot of them around puberty, and this like little joyful kid was suddenly this kind of taciturn man. And sometimes I have to say to my son, like, is he an asshole now? You know. And I thought, I think that it was actually, could be like painful as a parent to feel like, oh, my kid is just not available, and in the pilot, I think there's just so much of that, like Eve's just dying for a moment of real connection with Brendon, and he offers her a couple little bones, I think, but there's so that moment, when you're leaving the room. And by the way, we should just say, Brendon's roommate in college is played by a wonderful young actor named Cameron Boyce, who just recently passed away tragically. I just want to take a moment to remember him here. He was just a beautiful person to work with. And that scene, it's a moving scene anyway, and that moment, I think Eve's sense of having to leave, Brendon's just rushing her out of the room, and she doesn't want to leave yet, and that is a really powerful scene there. And I do think that void that she's trying to fill in those early episodes really comes out of that feeling of like, I've got a lot of love in me that isn't being acknowledged, and I think you just play that. So, I feel it every time.
Yeah, you've got such an amazing young cast that you're working with, Kathryn. They're all fantastic in this. What was it like collaborating with them?
Yeah, I mean, this cast, I was talking to Rashad too, like it is, we were so lucky. This group is so across the board magnificent individuals, and so talented. But yeah, like I love in watching it that every single person is so beautifully unique and perfect. Yeah, I can't say enough about this group of human beings. And thank you for mentioning Cameron too. Yeah, I learned a lot from this ragtag group for sure. I did.
Was there any specific character that changed the most between the adaptation of the novel and the series?
That's hard questions. Let me think about that. Because we're working from a novel, I think, we had a pretty good sense of who the characters were. I think, actually, Rashad is here. In the book, there's a character named Dumel, who is a Iraq war vet who is a car mechanic, and in the course of our adaptation, he became Curtis, the radiologist, and so that character really did evolve from the book in a way that the other ones kind of are a little bit closer to where we started.
I'm going to do one more question. I'm going to throw it to the audience, so start thinking of your questions. Tom, you've worked with HBO on both The Leftovers and Mrs. Fletcher. What made them the right home for these stories?
Well, I went to HBO with The Leftovers because HBO made the shows that made me want to do TV. I mean, they really did kind of create this so-called golden age of television. And I had a really great experience with The Leftovers, and so just wanted to go back and work with them again. And Amy Gravitt is here tonight. She's the executive who shepherded Mrs. Fletcher to this point. I'm very grateful to her for all that. So I've just had really wonderful experiences there.
All right, I'm going to throw it to the audience. Please raise your hand high. There's a question right here. Sure.
Yes. She just asked me how I felt, how I got myself to feel more comfortable with the material, and especially the kind of soul-bearing aspects of them. All the soul-bearing aspects of the material. It was a tough journey. And it was a tough one on all levels. So I'm not going to lie. It was hard to get in there with her because it was really like a vulnerable place to be. And also it was like a deep collaboration between all of us to try to figure out, tone was like hard to try to figure out because like we were saying, the line, the comedy, the kind of tone was tough, like with all of this bearing and the comedy, like to try to figure out exactly what it was. Also with the two storylines to try to figure out like what her storyline, like it was just like a tough like nut with her though. Like I felt very firmly like rooted, I think, in just like who she was. I guess like that was easy. Like if the stuff, the like physical stuff it's always like, it's never like, oh, I can't wait for this day, but it's not like, that is not as, that is never as scary as the other stuff. Like the really vulnerable, like one-on-one emotional, like that kind of stuff is the scarier. And also it was because it was like she's in such a journey to find something new about herself. And this was all about the path of it. And also I was surrounded by not only Tom, but like we had such an amazing group of women, such amazing women directors. Our amazing producer Helen Estabrook, who's here today. Like we really like, it was a point of surrounding of Tom. It was a point that it was surrounded with so many women that it felt very, I felt very buoyed by, and safe to take those chances with everybody and with our cast. So it felt like a place to take risk, which is like a huge first step, I think. Hope that answers your question in a very roundabout way.
All right.
Thank you.
Please raise your hands. There's a question here, the gentleman in the jacket. When does...
October 27th.
There's a question right here as well. Yes.
This is a limited series, so this is what it is. Yeah. So.
But so is Big Little Lies. So you have we don't know. We just don't know.
All right. Other questions? Front row.
This is for Kathryn, and you've been a part of so many ensemble casts, and I'm just going to pamper you and say that I will see things just because you're in it.
Oh gosh, that's ridiculous.
Thank you. It's that Kathryn Hahn one. Remember when she's the thing? So I'd love to know, and I'm so excited that you're leading the pack. You know,
Oh
this
gosh.
is for you, and it's awesome.
Very
It's so
sweet.
great.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, it's
So I'd love to know then how did this project come about? How yay you, and how did that happen?
Well, I read this amazing pilot, and then I really wanted to meet on it. So I drove all the way over to the west side of Los Angeles, and I met this person at his hotel. Now it sounds nefarious, at the bar at his hotel. Wait a minute, no, but we had a really lovely talk, and it just kind of went from there. Yeah, I was like, how do I get, the pilot had been written and I was like really compelled. I had not read the book yet at that point, but I or maybe I had. I think I did it. I read it so fast. I'm a very fast reader, but I knew I had read the pilot and maybe the book within a very short amount of time.
You said you read the book.
I think I must have read the book. Then I did. Then I think I got the pilot and I was like, I got to read this before meeting you. And then but I hadn't read it before reading the pilot. And then we had a really awesome long chat.
Yeah, so it's a strange. I don't actually remember what we talked about.
Like basically everything but this.
Yeah, but there was, I think, at least on my part, some feeling of recognition, like, oh, okay, here she is, yeah. I mean, I thought there's Eve. Okay, it felt very clear to me, and obviously I was coming at it with the same feeling as you, of having seen you in all sorts of other things and always loving what you did. But I do remember the conversation wasn't. I didn't feel like you had to say something to me.
Oh, that's a real relief. But I remember that we were like near the ocean, but you couldn't see the ocean. It was like that weird. Remember that it was like the ocean was right there, but we talked about everything kind of around and about it. And I just really remember talking to afterwards, talking to my representatives and being like, I just love that brain. Like I just was like very excited about what this possibly could be. I was really thrilled after that meeting.
And then we had to do it.
And then we made it.
Other questions? It's a question right here.
Okay. That is such a good point. I don't know if everybody heard it, but she was saying how that we see her working so hard to establish a relationship with her son at the beginning of in the pilot, and then we start to see her start working so hard to have a relationship with herself. And when do we get to see her finally relax? I don't know. How do we answer that? Because I don't know if we do that much. It's a hard. I think that she's in the middle of a search for sure.
And I will say, just in terms of stories, I don't think we watch stories to see people relax. I think we watch stories to see them search and struggle and transcend. And I think she does have some. We watch, I think, a short and very intense journey that she's on.
Yes. Yes.
The next book.
Amen.
All right. Other questions? There's a question back there. Please project.
Thanks.
All right. Other questions? Please raise your hand. There is a light in my face. All right. Oh, there's one up there. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, well, as I said before, when you collaborate, you really look to your collaborators to elevate you, and that is a part of storytelling that I'm new to, and I really did rely very much on Nicole Holofcener, Liesl Tommy, Carrie Brownstein, and Gillian Robespierre, who are wonderful crew of directors. But I also want to give a real shout out to our DP, Jeff Waldron, who I think gave the show just a consistently beautiful look, and was able to make so many shots interesting that I think, were in closed spaces. And that movement of the camera, I think, really just there's a kind of flow to these. Like when I was watching them tonight, I was really happy with the flow of the storytelling, and I think that comes from him and the directors.
I also I grew up in the suburbs, and I think making the suburbs like interesting and beautiful as a director and a writer in a way too, might not always seem like the easiest thing. But I think and you talked about this earlier today in your masterclass, this idea that a lot of your writing, whether it's election or little children and this, they all take place in the suburbs. And so I'm wondering what really draws you to that space and the characters who exist within it.
Yeah, and what I was saying today was that it is not. It doesn't even feel like a choice to me. It's just where my imagination resides. So I have stories I want to tell, and that's where they have to be told. But but it is a challenge, I think, especially in a film context, to get that world to really look interesting. Like the house that Eve is in is a house we actually built on a soundstage, and it was based on a real house. But our production designer Sarah White built it in such a way, I think, that it just opened up all kinds of opportunities. But without it, I think it still looks like a normal, modest house that somebody lives in. But we really had to kind of think about how do we make these ordinary suburban spaces interesting to look at.
Yet still, as the question earlier, still relatable as well, just like the characters are. Other questions? There's a question right here.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when I read it. I thought it was such a beautiful image and such a beautiful piece of writing. And the same thing that, I thought the same thing, that she would be somehow the person that would see her. The only person that could see her that way couldn't really see her, and it was him. And there's so much going on in that moment. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're asking me how the day went that day, I mean, it was just, I guess, the same. It was an incredibly safe environment. We have this awesome person named Claire, who's an intimacy coordinator, which is a new role that HBO has on some of their shows, which helps with all those scenes. And can't imagine the time before it. And anyway, she was really helpful with it. So it's just very safe and beautiful. And Liesl Tommy directed that episode, and I couldn't speak. I love her so much, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful, moving scene to me. I'm glad that you felt it, because I agree.
There's a question right here.
I don't talk to women. So the question was, I think, why did I choose to tell a woman's story? And when I was talking today, it came up as well. It's such an interesting moment in storytelling where every choice is so fraught and now is being seen through the prism of identity. And what I was saying earlier was that when I started as a writer, I was known for writing about men and male friendships, and to the point where I was sometimes grouped in this category called lad lit, and I felt it was very limiting, and I wanted to tell bigger stories, and I never tell a story from just one point of view. Every novel I've written has, ever since I kind of, starting with Election, really, there's always at least two, and there's always a female point of view and a male point of view, and that's just something I've gotten increasingly comfortable with. I also do feel like, honestly, that right now women are more interesting to write about and think about. I think that we are living through an ongoing revolution that is both the feminist revolution and the sexual revolution. Sometimes those two things are working together. Sometimes they're working at odds. And I think women are, getting all sorts of new opportunities, but also under all sorts of new pressures. And it's a subject that seems inexhaustibly interesting to me. And I feel like I have tried over the years to really, experiment with that, an empathetic imagination of these women and that I write about, and so it's just like an ongoing project for me, and but I talked to this woman in particular quite a bit about almost every moment that it was a real reality check for me as a male novelist. I have to believe I can tell the story to write the book, but then when we're coming to this next phase and creating something together, then I do have to listen. And especially, I think toward the end of this show, I really did feel like you were the authority on Eve. I mean, you were in it, and I was outside of it. So that happened.
He's also an incredible listener, which is no small thing, because and to answer your question, like it really isn't a small thing when you're in a collaborative environment to have somebody that is truly listening, especially when you know that what everybody is coming towards you with is genuinely there just because they have good info as to what it is to be experientially what it is, and he is just an incredible listener as a human being. So yeah,
it was really an education for me, because I was, as you said before, surrounded by women, and everybody had an opinion, and it wasn't always the same opinion, which is great to know too, right? It's not like there's some like party of women that have a exactly. That have a way to do it. So it it really was listening to a lot of voices and then trying to both adjust my sense of the story, but also hold on to what I needed to hold on to.
I think that's something that's like smart and great storytellers and creators do. They surround themselves with other creative people that can kind of collaborate, that you're collaborating with on a regular basis, like whether it's through the writing process or through the adaptation process or through the production process, or etc. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
Tried.
Other questions? There's a question at the very back.
Yeah, that's, if everybody heard that, it was a question about adapting books for either film or television, and is there, um, you know, is it what makes me choose that? And I think, to be honest, I feel like television is a more novelistic medium, because you can write a novel to whatever length it needs to be, and sometimes it's really hard to fit that novel into a 2-hour shape. And I think it's easier to make it a little bit longer. And like there are episodes in Mrs. Fletcher, the date in episode 2. There's no equivalent in the book. I mean, that's and there are a number of episodes that have some connection to episodes in the book, but we were able to tell new stories because we had the space to do that. So I do right now really, love the expansive quality of television. I was thinking about this the other day because Election is such a beautiful, tight movie, but it's also my shortest book. And so there really is everything of importance that's in the book is in the movie. And I can't say that about Little Children. I love that movie, but we had to leave out big chunks of the story to fit the box.
Because so much of your work has been adapted, whether it's been adapted by you with Miss Fletcher or adapted by someone else, does that at all come to your mind when you are writing these novels? The idea of, okay, how would this work if it were, say, in a different form?
I really try not to think that way, and the fact is that just writing a paragraph that works or a chapter that works is so remains even at this point in my career, like that's hard enough. I don't need to think about some other thing that might happen a couple of years from now.
Right. And you mentioned earlier today that you rewrite chapters over and over again until you are at a place where you're happy with it, and then you move to the next one. Is that your process? And where do you know where it's going to go, or is it a bit of a discovery?
It's got to be a discovery for me, or otherwise, that's the old Chekhov thing of no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader. You've got to really not get ahead of yourself and be in suspense as long as you can.
All right. Last question. Last question here.
Yes, he was asking about the character of Brendon, if we'll see more of him in the upcoming episodes, and that he seems a tad lost in college. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, he is a little bit lost in the pilot in these first couple of episodes, and he was kind of, I guess, the bully in high school. I mean, I think he has a lot more going on than that, but but I'm his mother. But I think that he I don't want to reduce him to bully. But yeah, you will see him. He's definitely got some stuff ahead that is I think that what he thinks he knows is going to be taken to task pretty soon. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll have to end it there. I just want to give one last big thanks to Kathryn and Tom for joining us. This has been amazing.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for sticking around too, you guys.
Thanks so much.